Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Diaries of a Drag Artist with your host, Juice. This is a podcast mostly about drag, where I'll be interviewing mostly local drag artists. Today, we have a very special guest. Madia is here with us.
Hello, divas.
So, Madia, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me
Yeah, of
here.
course. Thanks for coming. We're happy to have you, of
Oh my god,
course.
I'm happy to be here as
So,
always.
we're going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of kind of like a back and forth. If you ever feel like asking me a question, definitely do. I might jump in here and there, but it's mostly just going to be me asking you things.
Okay.
So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself so that the audience knows more about you.
So, my name is Madia, obviously, the sexual disease of Central Texas. I lean into very alternative drag. I'm a recent winner of Mixed Cutthroat February. I run with the House of Metamorphosis. I'm mainly a central drag artist. I like to experiment with the absurd, with very high conceptual concepts, stuff like that.
Nice, nice. We love to hear that. Very conceptual artists. We love that. If y'all didn't know, they're very talented. And if you don't know what
Thank you.
Cutthroat is, it's a pageant in San Antonio, usually alt based. The next thing I'm going to ask you about, it's more of us learning about you just a little more in detail. So, how old are you and how long have you been performing drag?
I am 19 years old and I have been performing drag for almost about a year now. My drag anniversary from the first time I fully performed in drag was April 28th. I performed in San Marcos at the Red Room. It was a very nice experience. I met with a lot of queens in the industry who I kind of look back at now and can mark, oh, that's this queen, that's this queen. It was very beneficial at the time, and seeing how much I've grown from that time has been very, I feel like, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I feel like around a year is kind of when you learn more like exactly who your drag character is going to be and how you want to perform, and like you really start to finalize that and refine it. So
Mm.
I guess that makes sense. Super excited to hear that. Happy 1 year.
Thank you.
Um, the next question also has to do about how you started drag. So what made you want to start drag?
So it kind of all came together. Um, so firstly, sophomore year, I was always let's back it up. Let me start in chronological order. So I kind of came from a theater background. Like I did theater in school. I was always in drama club, always in choir, always wanting to perform. And sophomore year, I kind of was struggling with my gender a little bit, especially being told as an actor my femininity was my greatest detriment and I needed to more present more mask. I just felt put in a lot of boxes, and I knew I wanted to be a performer, but I didn't want to be that kind of performer. And I also had an interest in makeup and stuff like that. So it all kind of came together, I guess, my senior year when I know I just decided oh, I want to create this character, Claudia, and I want to just experiment with drag, performing, stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I wanted to ask, how was drag introduced to you?
Drag was introduced to me obviously from the mainstream and Drag Race and stuff like that. But I feel like the piece of media that made me really want to start drag was Dragula, because I saw such a diverse cast of drag, which was so different and very artistic, and it really was pushing the physical limitations of what it means to be a drag artist, and I was just more entitled to that realm of drag rather than just trying to look like a girl, a pretty divalicious diva.
Would you say when you first started, you were kind of leaning more towards that divalicious diva?
I was, especially performing in San Marcos, because I felt a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pressure to kind of conform and kind of change my drag to be a lot more palatable than it is now, because I wanted to get booked and I wanted to be a lot more in the San Marcos scene, especially with whenever I was trying to lean into more alternative drag. A lot of the queens in the community were let's change that makeup around, let's this isn't the vision, and I'm oh, okay. So I decided to lean more I guess womana, which I guess I feel that's just my gender, as and that kind of messed with my mind a little bit, especially presenting as a womana character, and I felt the most a man in drag, which was really a weird sort of phenomenon, which I didn't really mess with. So I decided to lean more into a character creature moment, and yeah.
Yeah, and also earlier, Claudia did mention Dragula. If y'all don't know what that is, we don't really do free shout outs, but I will talk about it. It started as a competition in a bar with these two brothers who did drag together.
The
They're
Boulay brothers.
the Boulay brothers. They do alt drag, very pageant alt, I would say. They're very pretty, but they're still not like stereotypical. Like, you go to a show in San Marcos, everyone's wearing thigh highs, a bodysuit, and a double stack. But in the Boulay brothers, they would wear like goth gowns, crazy shoes, sometimes nothing at all.
Structural wigs.
Yeah, very like into the look itself as being conceptual. And then they created a TV show about it, which for the mass media, the two mass produced drag shows that we have right now are RuPaul's Drag Race, of course, and Dragula. Dragula is like the alt version of RuPaul's Drag Race almost. It's not the same, but if we were comparing them, that's how I would say it. So yeah, just so y'all know. Back to Madia. This one is a little bit more personal. It doesn't have to be about drag specifically, but if you want it to be, it can, of course. I'm going to ask you, who do you admire the most, celebrity and local?
Celebrity and local. Oh my goodness. That is. I gotta think about that. Right now. Hold on. Like, okay, so who influences my drag most or who influences like me most, like right now?
It's up to you. You can do both if you want.
I'll do both. I feel like that both kind of. So right now for celebrity, I would have to say Chaperone.
Work.
They're, if you don't know who Chaperone is, they're like a femme lesbian like pop icon, really like sapphic, rising
Very
up
sapphic.
in the music scene right now. I love their album Rise and Fall of a Midwest Queen. Or is it Midwest Princess? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. But I love them. They also like kind of identify within like drag and like kind of like push that boundaries of guess of like presentation. And a local drag artist who I feel like is really influencing my drag now, I would definitely say it's Gothic Jasmine.
Yes, we
They
love that.
they are literally so sensational. They're really like pushing the boundaries of like art, the way they paint themselves, the way they perform. Just everything about them is so prolific, and that's kind of a genre of drag I really want to lean into.
Cool. So this is another one about drag. I was gonna ask what your goals are with drag.
My goal is to drag is to quit drag. I want to. Just kidding. When I graduate college, I definitely want to like at least be booked in some sort of monthly/weekly show. Maybe like maybe not after I graduate college, but like at some time. And then long term, I want to just kind of grow my artistry into the highest form it can. I don't know what exactly that looks like. I do want to go forward in doing a lot more like pageants, a lot more drag competitions, and there's a lot I can't really like do until I'm like 21.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just really want to like lean into just pushing my drag higher and higher and just like growing it.
With you leaning into pageants more, are you going to stick with that more like alt creature s type of drag, or do you think you'll kind of switch it up here and there, or anything like that?
See, with Madia, I do feel like I am a very experimental drag artist. I feel like, in a sense, I am kind of like a chameleon. I'll like, whatever situation I go into, I'll like switch it up for whatever the occasion is. And I kind of see myself doing that a lot within my drag. So I definitely feel like pageantry, if it's like, let's say a very famous pageant in Chicago is like Continental, and they're very much like femme queens, like
Right.
giving like studded gowns, very classic drag.
Sasha Colby.
Sasha Colby. And I definitely see my drag also going in like that direction, especially when I'm like transitioning and like being like really like full like womana body queen. I definitely do see myself switching it up from time to time.
Cool, cool. Now, unrelated to drag, I want to know more about you. I want you to tell us about you as a person, and also I want to know a little bit about what you were like as a kid.
Okay, so what I was like as a kid. I remember as a kid, I feel like I was very flamboyant from like as a young child, and I didn't really like process that until like recently. I loved people like Hilary Duff. I loved Kim Possible. I loved like very like these high like femme shows, and like my kind of like family was like, oh, they have a crush on these people, and I'm like, I don't know if it was like a crush, but like it definitely was some sort of like feeling of like, oh my gosh, and like I loved like I had this fantasy of like being a pop star and like singing and like dancing around and like very much like flamboyant gay little child.
Yeah, I very much relate to that. Especially Kim Possible, girl.
I
If the
love Kim
main
Possible.
girl lead is also some kind of super spy, some superhero, something like
Literally.
that, teaching a good lesson to all the little girls out there, it make me want to be a grown woman one day.
Literally.
So, what about you now? Like, how would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself now? I would describe myself as demure, quiet, reserved. No, I'm just kidding. I would describe myself as kind of. I feel like as I've grown, I've gotten a little bit more feisty, a little bit more. Um, I would describe myself as open and empathetic, but if you
If you step on
if
your
you
toes,
step on my toes, I
break your kneecaps.
break your kneecaps. Boots. Iana
Boots.
Dupree.
So you'll put people in their place if you feel the need.
Real.
Okay, that's real. I feel like that's pretty common in a lot of trans people, especially because we build up a lot of walls growing up.
Very that.
In general, Gen Z does that very hard, but the queer community especially does, and especially if you didn't have like a lot of queer people around you growing up. Once you go to college, you almost want to keep them away from you because you're intimidated or scared. And then if you
Yeah.
ever actually get involved, you'll see how much love and community there is. So yeah, that's a little message for all y'all out there. If you're ever feeling scared, talk to someone.
It's a defense mechanism. Like, go
Yeah,
with that.
you'll be okay. It's okay. We're here for you. Anyways, I also want to know, as a queer person, when you were in school growing up before college, were you oppressed more or supported more by your peers and teachers?
I would say it differed from group to group, and it's definitely like I kind of, as a queer person, know where I sat in certain social situations, and like I feel like as a whole, queer people are very socially aware of like where they stand, their place, and they know of it. Like I remember in seventh and eighth grade, I would like my sisters kind of like forced me to do football, and I definitely didn't want to do football, but I didn't really have like the backbone to be like, I'm not gonna do football, like that's crazy. So I just kind of did it, and I was little like, I was like a fruity little gay kid, and you kind of really couldn't like hide it. So like I knew where I stood with that, but like once I quit that and like really stepped into like theater and like
Performing
yeah,
and stuff like
performing
that.
and like the arts, I kind
Yeah.
of like developed my queer identity and was able to like find community that way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. I actually relate to that. When I was growing up, my parents and brother really talked me into doing football. I was like signed up for athletics, and then a week before school, I dropped it because I found out I couldn't do step team if I was in football because of the schedule, and I didn't want to. Well, maybe I did want to run around with a bunch of men, but I didn't want to be hit. So I decided run around with a bunch of men and dance.
No, that's
Well,
crazy.
it's more than dance; it's cultural, but y'all get it.
I was also in step team in seventh grade, but I had to. It was a choice between football and step team, and I had to drop step team. It was really tragic.
Oh, see, we were on two ends of the same coin.
Very much that.
My next question, I wanted to know, did you face any specific problems growing up that led you to express yourself through drag now? Like, is there anything you remember that maybe you've brought back into a performance from your childhood or anything like that?
I feel like definitely growing up, I knew it was like a very big thing, especially as like a queer person of color, as a desi queer person. It was definitely like, I feel like it was a choice either between to choose like my culture or my queerness. And at a time, I feel like my culture was represented by my family, by like my mom and my dad, and I like really I didn't appreciate it for what it was because I don't feel like it was presented in the best light. So I definitely
Maybe
leaned
you didn't
more.
identify with their specific ideals, but
Yeah,
later
and
on you learn more about it.
I definitely kind of leaned more into my like queer identity because that's where I find more community, I guess, in that moment. But as I've kind of like grown, I like it's not this or that. It's kind of like they're both synonymous as one,
Yeah.
and like you do need to continue like growing your queer like as a queer person of color, especially like that like can administer so much light into the community, especially like if I had grown up seeing like flamboyant they see queer people like I kind of like follow now and see now, I feel like I would have been in a lot more like of a okay, I'm not just like crazy, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Being around like more, I guess, traditional.
Yeah,
Is
very
that
much
why?
that. And like now I feel like, especially in my drag, it's like I want to like administer my culture in like the best way possible because it's like just infusing them both I feel like is so powerful.
Earlier, you let us know that you were Mixed Cutthroat February.
I
Congratulations,
am.
by the
Thank you, thank you,
way.
thank you.
So now that we know that, I was gonna ask, can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what did you learn? Because I know that was your first pageant and you ended up winning, so it's a big thing in my eyes. So I would love to hear about that.
Absolutely. It was my first pageant. I was extremely nervous. I was shaking, nervous. Before that, I was just feeling very down on my drag, just as like in general. I was just like, I don't know if this is for me. And I feel like this pageant really like ignited a spark because it was like, this is exactly kind of where I want my drag to lie and like this very like structured, like specific, like polished form where it was just like you're getting critiqued, you're like presenting what you've been working on, like what you have prepared. And I just kind of felt a sense to like prove myself, especially within like the drag community, because I'm just like, I wanna like, I don't know, I wanna start on these hoes. I don't know, but
You want to make a really good first
I want to
impression.
make a really good first impression and kind of just like build that up because it's all just like process of growth.
Because not only, I don't know if we said this earlier, Mixed Cutthroat happens in San Antonio. We live in San Marcos. So we don't really get to go to San Antonio too often unless it's to see a show, let alone booked in one. That doesn't happen rarely. So it was kind of like a first impression type of thing. It was a lot of those people's first time seeing Madia perform, especially. And I think they ate it up,
Thank
honestly.
you.
What did you learn from that experience, though?
Oh, I learned a lot. It was a very big moment of like experience in a way that I didn't really like think it was gonna be. It was very much like while I was performing, I was just kind of like focusing on what I have to do, and it felt like familiar but like new. That's very contradictory, but like I felt like the work I've kind of like been doing, but like just at its highest, most elevated like stance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think it's because it was your first pageant, or do you think every pageant will feel like that?
I do think I feel like every pageant will be like that because I know if it's a pageant, if it's a competition, I'm gonna like work my hardest to like get it to the most elevated stance it can be. So when I'm on stage, I can just do what I have to, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, and I think the judges and the crowd really noticed that, and I think they also really loved how not only were you working hard, you were representing yourself and your culture in your numbers, which not only shows hard work but shows like character. And you had a lot of versatility in what you did too, because you did three very different things, and I think you did great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. How has the current political climate of the world and other world issues influenced your drag?
Um, I will say I definitely feel a sense, especially with everything going on right now, to keep my culture very much alive. Because as we see in the world, culture is getting fully erased through like genocide and like imperialism and really like horrific human rights violations and
Yeah.
war crimes. Also, I feel like within the drag community, there is a lot of racism, a lot of like tokenizing, a lot of like disproportionate booking of white
Oh,
people, and um, certain stuff like that. I just like wanna, especially in my drag, I just wanna give something new, an alternative point of view that is different from kind of anyone. If I'm words together, I just wanted to provide a point of view that's like different from what we're seeing to kind of bring up the more gritty, subversive environment that drag was kind of like brought up in, rather than the sort of mainstream, sort of like capitalistic way I feel like people are doing drag now.
drag, I feel a lot of people, especially in Texas, view drag specifically as a man dressing up as a glamazon woman. And although that may be a lot about how drag started, last episode we actually talked about where the word drag comes from, which comes from ballroom and it comes from a trans woman of color. It has nothing to do with gay white men. So it is a little crazy to me, especially in Austin, to see the amount of gay white men kind of running the drag community because it does come from ballroom, which comes from trans people of color and other queer people of color. But yeah, I definitely do see what you're saying about that. What big projects have you done in drag, and how have they been beneficial to you?
Um, I feel like one big project for me was definitely drag out the vote.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a big push for voter registration, and I feel like that was a moment where I felt again because we don't usually get a lot of drag shows in San Marcos. I feel like there
Yeah,
is.
it's
It's
usually house
very
shows and stuff like
house
that,
shows. It's very like
or a
few and far
spotlight.
between. Very much that. Very much that. And this moment, I was like, this is voter registration. I want this to be kind of pseudo political. I want to like
Yeah.
definitely again represent my culture, represent where I'm from, and like showcase it in a way that I feel like people haven't really seen, especially if we're talking about like visibility within like queer POC. You don't really see like brown queer people
Mm-hmm.
like represented, especially like growing up within the media. So I feel like in that moment I just wanted to like even if it's like in a microcosm of San Marcos, I wanted to represent that.
I think the crowd loved it. They love to see you bring the dancing out. Tell us more about that.
So I did a little bit of Bhangra, which is cultural, like kind of Bollywood desi dancing. And I I grew up kind of like, especially like going to weddings. If you're like Punjabi and shit like that, or stuff like that, my bad. If you're Punjabi and stuff like that, you know that like dancing is a very integral part of your culture. Like especially for weddings, you perform for the bride and the groom, and like even as a child, like you would kind of like grow up doing that, performing at weddings, and like it's kind of just like you start admiring the culture and stuff like that. And I feel like as like a young child, I didn't really like. I kind of like paid it dust, but it was still like, oh, like I still did it, but I didn't really like appreciate it the way like I kind of do now, especially like now that I'm on my own and I'm not like surrounded by like Punjabi people all the time. It's a little like I want to feel at home in that sense.
You want to bring that to the audience too,
Yes.
right? Share that. I can kind of relate to that. My number at Drag Out the Vote was about being trans, and I did Part of Your World because you know how she like wants legs because she has a tail.
Mm.
I too want legs because I have a tail in the front. So, so sorry. Um, during my number, I pulled out a trans flag, and it was very like beautiful moment. People were crying. The host whispered in my ear as I was performing and said, "You're so beautiful." It made me feel great. But yeah, I think that crowd definitely was like good. Especially for San Marcos, they were all wanting to see what everyone had to bring, and it wasn't like I'm here for this queen. How about you? It was like, oh, let's go register to vote and see some drag, and I feel like
Yeah.
it went pretty well. We got I think over 20 people, maybe over 25 people to sign up or not sign up, register to vote. Which is really important. And that's actually pretty good for San Marcos, if y'all didn't know. There are a lot of people here who do not get registered to vote. There's a lot of people who are here for school, so they don't want to get registered. They'll vote in their county. But if our point of view for it was if you're living in this town, you should register to vote so that you can, you know, pick the right candidates who are going to run the city you're living in correctly. But yeah, other than politics, we can move on from that. My next question is, since you started drag, how have you seen the community grow?
I feel like in the last year, I feel like it's more been like an introduction within like the current drag scene. But as I've seen it sort of evolve, I have like realized that it's not as inclusive as it says it is, and it is a little bit more of a shield to kind of hide the fact of like the more sinister racism that is underneath and how people continue platforming and defending like active abusers and racists in the community. I do think it's a little problematic in that way, and I feel like it is growing for the better, but also in the same way it's saying stagnant within that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some people who want to like stay complicit within that and not move forward with the change. But I feel like I'm always in like a growth mindset within that. We need to like
Yeah.
move forward and like progress, and I hope that's something we can see in
Mm-hmm.
the drag scene.
I think as the community keeps growing, we've seen a lot of new drag artists popping up all the time. I think lockdown did a lot for that. People started like playing with makeup and hair and then found out about drag and stuff. But also, we have a lot of shows that are house shows and stuff. We invite a lot of people over to come see our talent, and they end up wanting to start drag, and we support them. We tell them, you know, learn your look, choose a song, find a show. Um, it's a lot easier than it sounds, but it takes a lot of work to be a talented performer. And yeah, I think the community, like you were saying, it's grown on the inside a lot, but nothing has really changed. It's getting bigger and bigger, and there is still a lot of these, like, they're now hierarchical almost. It's very much like if you don't know this specific queen in San Marcos, you're not friends with her, then you're never getting you're never getting booked at that location because she's the only person with the show once a month there. And that's usually how it works in San Marcos right now because, like we mentioned last time, we don't have Stonewall anymore. We don't have a queer performance space, and that is what the House of Metamorphosis is working with. Shout out to House of Metamorphosis. We are both members. If y'all didn't know, just thought I'd throw that in, remind y'all. Whoop 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 whoop. Butterfly. Anyways, I'm going to be a beautiful butterfly. Any specific things you want to share with the audience before we leave? Claw Madia.
A queen in San Antonio. I'm not gonna name her name because it's a little inappropriate. She likes to mispronounce my name. Call me Claudia. I like to think it's her vocal stem, and I would like to share that with the audience today.
I believe it is a vocal stem because I heard it way too many times in just one night. From multiple people, actually. But is there anywhere that, like, the people can find you and stuff? Do you want to share anything like that?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram at Clawmadia, CLAWMADIA, and follow the House of Metamorphosis account as well to see me at other shows they may host there.
Yeah, and if in case y'all need help spelling the House of Metamorphosis, find a dictionary. It's spelled how it sounds, and you'll find the words very clearly. Yeah, thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. My special guest, Claw Madia, was great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a wonderful time.
Yeah, of course. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.